All right, everybody, welcome to tonight's Southwest Region Sportsperson's Caucus presented by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'm John Livingston. I'm the Public Information Officer for CPW here in the Southwest Region. I want to thank everybody who's joining us tonight, whether it's the CPW staff that we have here assembled on Zoom and all the participants and folks that we have watching us on tonight's Facebook Live. Really happy to be able to reach so many people through this format. So I want to thank everybody for attending the meeting. We've had a little bit of weather around Durango today, but it looks like the lightning is going to clear out. So hopefully we avoid any technological glitches here tonight and can have a good meeting and presentation for everybody. With that, I want to go ahead and introduce our Southwest Region Caucus representatives, Mia Anstein and Roger Cesario. And Mia, I'll just open it up to you for a few opening comments, and then we'll go over to Roger.
Thanks for having another caucus for our region. It seems like with the virtual meetings that we don't get to visit often enough anymore. But for those who don't know me, I'm Mia Anstein. I'm one of the caucus members for the Southwest region, and my term finishes up this year. So I'm kind of bummed because with the past 2 years, it seems like we didn't get to do a whole bunch. But I look forward to seeing what is coming up and where CPW is going to be going as far as hunting and fishing and everything else. I am a volunteer. I'm a regional representative for SCI in the state of Colorado. I'm also a member of the ethics committee and a lot of other things. As far as for Colorado, I'm a member of the governor's outdoor partnership program and looking forward to doing some more work with organizations on that and possibly hearing some more updates. I know at our last caucus meeting, we had some updates. So I hope that we get some good feedback from this meeting today and that we can help you guys with what you guys are working on.
Thanks, Mia, and we'll go over to Roger now.
John, I'm going to have to ask you not to have me follow Mia because I'm not near as good of a speaker as she is. And it's a hard one to follow up, but I would just like to thank everybody for joining us tonight and taking time out of your evening and look forward to the discussion.
Very good. Thanks, Roger. I appreciate it. Now I want to transition over to our region manager, Corey Chick. He's got a few announcements and some updates on some staffing around the state.
Thanks, John. And if you could not have me follow Roger, he is a way better speaker than I am. So now, all joking aside, me and Roger, I wanted to send a special thanks to you two. The work that you do for us is amazing. I appreciate the time that you spend. Also to staff that are on the call and the presentations that you'll see today are much appreciated. A quick update on the governor's new Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission appointees. We had 2 new appointees to the 11 member commission. Those include Richard Reading of Denver and Gabriel Otero of Fruita. Commissioner Reading is a representative of the public at large. He's the Vice President for Science and Conservation for the Butterfly Pavilion, where he oversees the research and conservation and curatorial and horticultural departments. Commissioner Otero was appointed to serve as a representative of sportspersons and a member of the West of the Continental Divide. He's a senior campaign specialist for the Wilderness Society, a nonprofit land conservation organization dedicated to protecting natural areas and federal public lands in the United States, where he develops and implements national monuments and wildlife refuge campaigns. Eden Vardy, also of the West Slope, was reappointed to the commission, who serves as the representative for production and agriculture and a member of the West Continental Divide as well. I would say, or I would ask, if you are curious of other members of the commission, you can find that on our webpage and the commission webpage as far as their affiliations, what they are representing, and also their bios as well on that website. would be remiss if I didn't thank Commissioners Luke Schaefer and Charlie Garcia for the time that they spent on the commission. Two amazing folks, and I really enjoyed the time and issues that we dealt with over the last four or so years. Last thing I'd really like to touch on is with everything that's going on in the agency right now, I want to ensure folks that we're committed to the mission of the agency, and we'll push through all the issues and just things we're dealing with right now. So I'd ask if you could help us do that and keep us aligned, and we'll move forward with those. So that again, thanks to everyone that is attending statewide. And John, I'll kick it back over to you to start the meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate it. We will jump right in. We're going to start today's meeting with an aquatics update from our senior aquatic biologist, John Alves. He's going to be diving into some of the voluntary fish enclosures we have in our region. So John, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thanks, John. Greetings, everyone. Just want to spend a little time talking about our voluntary closure and mandatory closure program that we have, fishing closures. This time of year, we're concerned about water temperatures in our rivers. Everybody knows we're in the middle of a long-term drought, and despite all the good rain we've had here in the last few days, it doesn't really help us a whole lot. What helps us is the snowpack and the long-term runoff. And so we have a regulation that allows us to enact either a voluntary or mandatory fishing closure as deemed by this decision tree that John put up on the screen. And if you look down, there's these three pink boxes that we look at. And the one that we're looking at is this expected high mortality of angler released fish. And what happens when you get water temperatures up towards 70 degrees, and if you get it up around 75 degrees, it could cause lethal effects in trout. And as the temperature goes up, flows go down, oxygen also goes down too. And so when an angler catches a fish and fights it to, extended amount of time, it uses all of its energy. And then when it's released, it may take off okay, but the problem is that there's lack of oxygen in the river stream already. And so it has a hard time recovering from that handling, whether it be the fight, the long-term fight, or the handling when it's captured. So when temperatures are cooler, like in the morning, the impacts aren't so great. So when looking at this this decision tree, we're monitoring all of our major recreation rivers in the Southwest region. Right here in Durango, you got the Animas, the San Juan and Pagosa, the Rio Grande and Pinellas over in the Rio Grande Basin, Gunnison and Taylor rivers, as well as the East River and the Lake Fork of the Gunnison over in the Gunnison Basin. And then we have the San Miguel and Uncompahgre River basins over in Area 18 out of Montrose. And so we're constantly taking a look at those, the online sources of information that we get. You can go online and see what the flows are and the temperature is. And what I look at is what is the maximum temperature daily, and also what percent of daily average is the flow. And if you look right here in this little box, if it's greater than 71 degrees and the stream flows are less than 50% of daily average, you can find that on the Division of Water Resources or the USGS websites, and you can calculate that. And when we start seeing those conditions go down, then we can have either a short-term or voluntary closure or a long-term closure, which would be a mandatory closure approved by the director. We're not there yet. We're in the voluntary stages. So when you look across the region, the Rio Grande's doing well right now. Conejos River is on the verge of probably having a voluntary closure in the future. We're starting to see water temperatures rise. The Gunnison and Taylor River are doing just fine, mainly because they have Taylor Reservoir up there that's supplying water at good flows. Uncompahgre below Ridgeway is doing great. We're not sure about the San Miguel because we don't have any temperature information, but the aquatic biologists throughout the state are going out and monitoring. I just haven't received anything on that. But so here recently we had water temperature and flow problems here on the Animas River, the San Juan, and let's see. And the Dolores River below McPhee, I'm sorry. About a month ago or so, maybe longer than that, we had conditions on Tamicha Creek near Gunnison that traditionally has problems with water temperature and flow. So we put a voluntary closure for fishing afternoon. We see that water temperatures will go up in the afternoon, especially afternoon towards 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and then we'll gradually go down throughout the night. So we're asking anglers not to fish during that time, afternoon, and they can go back and start fishing every morning until we start seeing some stressed fish or conditions degrade over time. Then we might enact a mandatory closure. I have not had to do that in the years that I've been a senior biologist, and even in this major drought that we're in. So what can anglers do? One of the things they can do is pay close attention to fishing in warmer water, stop angling when captured fish show signs of labor recovery or mortality. Lots of times you won't see that. You'll release the fish, you'll take off. Other times it may just go belly up, and that'll tell you that your fish, even though you may not know what the temperature is, you're in a situation where we might see extended mortality in fish when we're talking about trout here. Use a heavier tippet, play the hook trout quickly and avoid extensive handling of the fish. Keep the fish fully submerged in water during the release. Use borderless hooks to facilitate a quick release. And of course, stop fishing when the water temperatures get up around 70 degrees. When it gets to 71, we start seeing that consistently. Then we have the opportunity or responsibility to enact a closure, whether it be voluntary or mandatory. So right now we're asking the anglers to help us out, protect the fishery by only fishing up till noon and then quitting for the day. And if that goes well, then we'll be able to, we won't have to enact any mandatory closures. I don't want to be there. But we hate to, have a situation where we take angling opportunity away from the public, but we're doing what we can to preserve the aquatic resource. Anybody have any questions on that? One other thing that anglers can do is go to high streams and lakes and go fishing where the water temperatures are typically colder during the summer. This is major. Our big rivers down lower elevations, Rio Grande, Animas, San Juan, Caneos. Well, if there are any questions, that's about all I had on our fishing closures right now. That are, you can go to our website and see the closures. There's a lot of them up in the Northwest right now. We've only got 4, which is a good deal.
Very good. Thanks, John. I just wanted to give the opportunity. We doesn't look like we've got any questions coming in on this topic from the public, but I wanted to open it up if any of the area managers wanted to expand upon this topic at all before we switch gears to the terrestrial update. So if anybody wants to just hop in, and if not, we'll switch over to Jamin. All right, looks like we're good. All right, well, thank you.
If I can just give one other plug to the anglers out there. We're having a smallmouth bass tournament at Ridgeway. There's also one going on, I believe, at Elk. And if you want to join and go out and catch a bunch of fish, you have a good chance of getting a monetary prize, so cash prize.
John,
One
we
guy's
have
got 185 fish in one day. Fishing's good.
John, we had one question come in from Brandon on the Facebook live stream. He asked, how can anglers themselves go out and test water temperatures? Are there, thermometers available, or how can anglers, if they want to test themselves, go do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Anglers should always carry a thermometer with them. Take a surface reading, usually out away from the shore. But yeah, carry your surface read, a thermometer, and take readings frequently during the time that you're fishing. When it gets up to 70, 65 to 70, it's probably a good idea that you stop fishing for the day.
Very good. Thanks, John. I appreciate your time tonight. And with that, we'll switch gears over to Jamin Grigg, our senior terrestrial biologist, who has a few updates from all of his terrestrial bios out doing all their great work. So Jamin, we'll leave it to you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Good to see everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Jamin Grigg, the Southwest Senior Biologist. Last meeting, I gave a couple of PowerPoint presentations about a couple of the big projects that we have going on in the region. One is a lion density study that is rotating around the state and currently is in the Gunnison Basin, where we're capturing and radio collaring mountain lions and getting density estimates using cameras and a Archery site study designed to get mountain lion density estimates in the Gunnison Basin. And then the other project I talked about a little bit was the elk collaring and capture and radio collaring effort that we have ongoing in GMU 521, which is in the E14 DAU up in the Grand Mesa area, north and east of Paonia, or up in the Raggeds Wilderness area, McClure Pass, some of that country. So I gave a couple of PowerPoints related to those projects last time, and I'm not going to do a PowerPoint this time, but I just wanted to give a couple brief updates. The lion capturing and radio collaring throughout the winter went well. We got most of our sample radio collared, and we'll continue to collar the rest of our sample throughout the summer opportunistically as we can, and then heading into the fall and next winter. And then we'll be deploying the cameras, the motion sensor cameras across the landscape this upcoming winter, and getting lion detections on those and coming up with our density estimates this winter. So that's all going well. And then the 521 Elk Collaring Operation. As many of you are aware, there's been a lot of interest in elk distribution and elk movements up on the Grand Mesa, specifically in GMU 521. We've heard from a lot of stakeholders and constituents about their concerns related to elk movement, elk distribution, how elk are responding to hunting pressure, how they're responding to the over-the-counter hunting seasons, and those types of things. So we're in the process of collecting a lot of data on those elk. We captured and radio collared 30 elk this past winter to get about half of our sample. And then actually this next month, probably within the next couple of weeks or so, we have a helicopter capture company lined up to capture and radio collar another 20 cows and 20 bulls, so 40 total, to bring our total sample up to about 70 elk that will have radio collared in GMU 521. Those elk all have GPS radio collars that send locations to us about every 4 hours. So we're collecting a lot of really good habitat use data, movement data, migration data, getting a lot of data related to how those elk interact with neighboring DAUs and elk in adjacent units, and how they're responding to hunting pressure, how they're using public lands versus private lands. A lot of different really good questions that we can address and analyze through that data. So that project's going well and is ongoing. We should have the rest of our sample hopefully deployed here in a couple of weeks. We've been working with the Forest Service on the permits related to that. So that's all going well. Speaking of radio collaring elk, beginning this upcoming winter, we are going to be implementing intensive elk monitoring areas, which is very similar to what we've been doing with mule deer for well, since the late 1990s, so a long time now, 25 years, something like that. So so for a number of years, we've had study sites spread across the state where we intensively monitor mule deer survival, movement, migration, using radio collars. We generally sample about 60 fawns and 80 does on an annual basis, and collect data on them that way. And beginning this upcoming winter, in some ways in preparation for wolf reintroduction, but then just something that will allow us to keep better track of our elk herds in general. But we're going to be implementing 3 different elk monitoring areas around the state. One of those is going to be in the Gunnison Basin. The other 2 are likely to be Middle Park and South Park, those DAUs in that area. So starting this winter, we'll be radio collaring calves and adult cows, while actually supplementing a number of adult cows that we already have radio collared and have had radio collared for a number of years, but increasing those sample sizes and really intensively monitoring elk survival and cause specific mortality and movement and all of that in our elk herds. So that will help with elk monitoring and gives us a lot of good baseline data to use for a lot of different reasons related to landscape conservation and corridor conservation, all of that stuff, but then also good baseline data as we head into wolf reintroduction here as well. So that will be ramping up here this winter. I mentioned the wolf reintroduction, and I think Matt's going to give us more of an update on that later. Matt and Corey, they've been heavily involved with that. But along with Matt and Corey and a number of other folks, Brandon Diamond and I, Brandon's our area wildlife manager in Gunnison. Brandon and I are on the wolf reintroduction management team, and are involved with writing that plan and editing that plan. So we've been busy with that, and that will go to the the commission, I believe in December, for their review and approval. Brandon and I are also on, I wanted to give a brief update on our license allocation and preference point work group. I suspect there's some interest in that and maybe some questions related to that. Brandon and I are on that work group. That's an ongoing process that began about a year ago now at this point. But at a high level, essentially the agency is reviewing how we allocate licenses, how we allocate resident licenses versus non-resident licenses. We're also evaluating our preference point system, hybrid draw, all of those different components, as well as kind of on a statewide level, our allocation of over-the-counter licenses, so the unlimited over-the-counter licenses, and kind of a review of that. So last fall, we sent out a public comment form. We received over 10,000 responses to that, about 10,500 public responses, getting people's opinions and hearing their voice related to our license allocation and preference point system. We held a number of public focus groups this summer, throughout the summer, and collected input as well through those focus groups, as well as sending out a big game attitude survey that went out to the public as well, collecting input on our big game season structure and how we allocate licenses. I guess the next step that I wanted to let people know about, we're going to be hosting a commission workshop with our Parks and Wildlife Commission members. That's going to be on August 23rd, sort of an informative workshop for them. And there's also a public option where folks will be able to tune in virtually on that, and can tune in and listen to that workshop or watch that workshop as well, and just kind of get some more information about how we currently allocate licenses and some of the review process that we're currently going through, and kind of the next steps related to that. So we'll present that information to the commission again August 23rd, with a public option to virtually attend that and watch that. Alongside that, we're putting together a financial analysis of how different alternatives would financially, just the different financial impacts that various license allocation and preference point alternatives would have on revenue and on finances. Daniel Eisenhart, who's in our licensing department, is putting together that financial analysis, and that will be forthcoming as well. And then from there, we'll see kind of where the commission wants to go from there. So that's kind of the next step, and then we'll see what the commission's preference is at that point. So I think those are really the big updates I wanted to give for this meeting. Biologists are obviously busy with a lot of different field projects and herd management plans and just a lot of different things going on. So anyway, that's kind of a terrestrial update for now, and be happy to take any questions or discussions that might be out there.
Yeah, Jamin had a couple questions come in on Facebook, two different topics. So I'll start with the license allocation, since we were just on that. Luke was curious how large the working group is on that, and are there public members that are involved in that process?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. The internal team. So currently there's an internal team involved with the process. Brandon can jump in here too. There's probably, I don't know, 12 or 14 internal folks who are involved. That's everybody from biologists to district wildlife managers, area wildlife managers, folks in our licensing team. And then we're collecting a lot of public input through the public stakeholder groups that we've had and the public comment forums. So there has been a lot of public input, and that will certainly continue, I suspect, after following the commission workshop next month. Again, that's August 23rd. I suspect at that point we'll be going back out to the public to collect more public comment at that point. But the internal working team is maybe a dozen or so members that kind of span the different branches of our agency.
Very good. And then Jamie, going back to the elk study, Roy asked, are you going to be able to track elk density as well as the use of oil and gas leases and new drilling activity impacts? Will that be kind of part of the study there? I think it kind of also maybe ties into some of the RMPA stuff that we were discussing earlier.
Right. Right. So certainly we'll certainly be using the radio collar data to inform our knowledge of elk distribution across the landscape. As far as elk densities go, most of we do collect, we do produce population estimates through our population models. So there's a lot of different data that goes into those models that would give an estimate of density, everything from the helicopter survey data that we collect in the winter, survival data that we have from radio collars across the state, hunter harvest data, all of that data along with some other variables go into our population models that produce our population estimates for each herd around the state. Excuse me, that gives us a density estimate across a geographic region. Certainly the radio collar data helps to inform how elk are distributed across the landscape. So we might have a density on a geographic area like a DAU, a herd level density, but the radio collars really allow us to get a better idea of how elk are responding to, whether it's oil and gas development, human recreation pressure, hunting pressure, whatever else might be out there on the landscape. So certainly we can use that data and are using that data for those purposes. John, you just brought up the BLM, RMPA. I might just give a real brief update on that. We've been, excuse me, we've been very active in commenting on the GMUG Forest Plan revision, the Grand Mesa and Compadre Gunnison Forest Plan revision that's been ongoing, for years now at this point. We've been providing a lot of comment and input on that forest plan revision, and now we're heading into a statewide BLM revision, both for big game as well as Gunnison sage grouse. So we'll be actively commenting on those BLM management plans as well. And I would encourage the public and our stakeholders to be involved in that too. You can hop on BLM website. I'm sure we can provide those links, but there's a lot of opportunity for public comment and stakeholder engagement in those processes too.
Very good. Thanks, Jamin. Just wanted to give the opportunity to Mia or Roger if they had any additional questions for Jamin.
Jamin, I was wondering about that that workshop. You said there's going to be a public element there, but not comment. So you're getting public comment through the comment forums and the working groups, but at the actual workshop, there won't be public comment through that, correct?
That's my understanding, Roger. And Corey, feel free to interject if you know anything different, but I believe there will be a virtual option for folks to listen in, for the public to listen in and watch that workshop, but I don't believe that'll be an actual public comment period at that time. There will be a lot of opportunity for public comment following that though. I suspect probably through the fall and through the winter.
Okay.
And I mean, correct me also if my understanding when that was announced is that it's education, not just for the commission, but for the public as well, was why the public can view it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a kind of an educational opportunity, I think, for everybody involved. Yeah. The public as well as the commission.
Jamin, we had one more question come in over Facebook I wanted to run by you, and I think this would be, maybe appropriately addressed also by area managers for each specific area. But have we been able to gauge how effective our seasonal wildlife closures have been in our region over the last few years, especially with some of the new ones that have been implemented? Are there any kind of encouraging conclusions we can take away from the use of some of our seasonal closures, specifically on state wildlife area lands and whatnot?
Sure. I'll start with that, and then anybody else who wants to jump in, area managers or anybody else can. I think from a biological perspective, those closures absolutely are critical and effective for those animals during a really crucial time of year during the winter. There's a number of research studies across the West, not just in Colorado, but across the West, that have really shown those closures to be beneficial for wintering wildlife and really needed during that time period when they're really needing to conserve energy through the winter. So I think I think there's a lot of evidence, just not just in Colorado, but elsewhere as well across the Western US, that those closures can be really effective for wintering big game and for other species as well.
John, I'll jump in real quick to Jamin's and just add that oftentimes when we see issues relating to the biologicals of wildlife, it's hard to put your finger on one thing so often in conjunction with other things we might be implementing. This is, like Jamin said, it's a very important part of really getting at the what's trying to really get at what's going on and on that broad scale. So hopefully that helps a little.
Yeah, and I think Rachel wanted to add something here as well.
Sure, I'll add, building on both what Jamin and Corey said, we see on particularly our state wildlife areas that are close to the public, when that closure isn't disturbed or the disturbance levels are significantly lower than they've been in the past, we see animal behavior change. And additionally, looking at the larger landscape scale, we have many anecdotes from our teams, from our district wildlife managers and biologists of the changes in big game patterns that we've seen since the restriction got put on shed antler collection and hunting. We see a lot less disturbance in some places to our big game herds, where they would have continually gotten bumped off of some of their preferred wintering grounds in the past. So definitely both empirical and anecdotal data that we're seeing that these things do help our wildlife to get through the winters and help our big game, little steps here and there. Anything that we can do for the health of our herds is really important. So thank y'all for your support of those and for your respect of those.
Absolutely. Well said, Rachel. Thank you for that. All right. Well, without any further questions for Jamin, I think we'll move on. I know I've been kind of talking with Brandon and Adrian here a little bit about maybe switching things up on the agenda, just going with the flow of the meeting, though. Since we're on the topic of state wildlife areas right now, I think we'll stick with our original agenda. And Adrian Archuleta, our area wildlife manager in Area 15, is going to kind of get the conversation going about access at our state wildlife areas. As many of you know, Colorado has more than 350 state wildlife areas that are in place for the protection of wildlife habitat and for recreation from our sports persons. But Adrian, I'll go ahead and pass it along to you, and we'll get rolling with this one.
Thanks, John. I missed the text saying you are up next again. So I'm ready though. I have a few slides to share, just mainly so you don't have to look at my face the whole time, but try to get this up here. That coming through all right? Okay, I think you're on mute, John, but sound like yes. Perfect. So thanks. Good evening, everybody. As John said, my name is Adrian Archuleta. I'm the area wildlife manager based here out of Durango for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Going to talk a little bit tonight about state wildlife area access, some of the uses we've been seeing and kind of where we may be headed. So just a good picture of the sign here, or what our current signs are looking like. And if you notice, just the banner on the bottom kind of pertains to some of the new requirements that I'm going to get into here in a little bit. But to start off, to jump in, just a little plug of, some of the best information to be found on our state wildlife areas, state parks, other recreation lands can be found on our brochure, Colorado State Recreation Lands. This is a teaser. This is in draft for the upcoming year. Should be hitting the press here very soon, but a good resource. So to start off, just going to kind of cover what state wildlife areas are, kind of how they've been purchased, funded, and again, kind of where we may be headed with some of this stuff. And I think the slide you're looking at, just to kind of put this discussion into context, is some of the uses that we've been seeing and continue to increase. So Colorado state wildlife areas are acquired predominantly using hunter and angler dollars for the purposes of conserving wildlife habitat and providing wildlife related recreation. As John mentioned, CPW manages more than 350 state wildlife areas for this purpose. But as both Colorado's human population and tourism have boomed in the recent years, CPW has noticed a significant trend of people engaging in activities for which these properties were not intended. These issues run the gamut from illegal camping to engaging in recreational activities that disturb and may displace wildlife. So to begin to address this trend and ensure state wildlife areas continue to exist for the benefit of wildlife, Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission voted in 2020 to require everyone who enters an SWA to possess a valid license to hunt or fish in Colorado. And then in 2021, the commission voted to add the Colorado State Wildlife Area Pass as another option to access these areas and contribute to wildlife conservation. While hiking, for example, has been allowed on state wildlife areas, it was never an intended use of the properties as other recreation. We've seen other recreation as well, may not have been the intended use. Many state wildlife areas are closed periodically, as mentioned before, during the year when wildlife are reproducing and nurturing their young or on critical winter range. So this change also is a recognition by the Parks and Wildlife Commission that wildlife management is not a tax-funded endeavor. CPW relies on the sale of licenses and passes to preserve these important areas. Just as visitors to Colorado State Park are required to possess a state parks pass, visitors to state wildlife areas are now required to possess a valid license or state wildlife area pass. Requiring a license or state wildlife area to pass to access state wildlife areas reinforces the primary intent of these properties and ensures users are contributing to their maintenance. Requiring a license or pass to access these SWAs is consistent with requirements on many other states. This new regulation allows CPW to continue protecting key wildlife habitat in Colorado. So with that, over the last couple of years, as we've seen some of these new requirements, changes, CPW staff has worked really hard to sign these properties accordingly. And we continue to educate the public on these requirements and the intended purposes of these properties. So a lot of this stuff that I just covered can be found on our fact sheet, which is available on our website, but still is a fairly new requirement. So again, we're really trying hard to educate the public on these requirements. So requiring the access pass and the licenses is all fine and good, but we still have, this piece to grapple with of these other forms of uses that may or may not be impacting the habitat and or wildlife related recreational activities. So CPW, with that being said, CPW continues to evaluate and consider additional actions to ensure these properties are fulfilling their purposes. So again, these pictures, again, just I think put into context, these are some of our local region properties. Not to single out any single form of recreation, but you're all aware of it. And I think we've discussed, and you probably, been in many circles that talk about how, we've seen drastic increases in use of our public lands in Colorado, especially over the COVID pandemic. So some of the next steps, I think entail taking a hard look at state wildlife areas, what pressures, what types of recreation we're seeing. Is this all compatible with intended purpose? Are these recreational activities impacting wildlife habitats and wildlife related recreation? So with that, I think we need to start asking what can potentially be prohibited or restricted to help with or protect and manage these lands. And essentially this can be addressed or may be addressed with changes to Parks and Wildlife Regulation Chapter 9, which pertains to wildlife properties. So with that, I would open it up to other staff or answer any questions. And while folks are thinking or John's looking, this is the state wildlife area fact sheet that I referenced, which is available on our website.
Thanks, Adrian. I am not currently seeing any questions coming in from the public on the Facebook stream. So yeah, I just wanted to give it here just a second to see, if Mia and Roger have any additional questions or if any other area managers wanted to weigh in. All right, looks like we are good. Thanks, Adrian. I appreciate you reminding the public of that. And with that, we will go ahead and transition over to Brandon Diamond, our area manager, the Gunnison office. And Brandon's got a public survey that's going on for one of his game management units right now. And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that survey and what it's all about. So thanks, Brandon.
All right, thanks, John. Can you see that?
We got you.
All right, good evening, everybody. Appreciate the time. I really enjoy these meetings. It's a great opportunity to exchange information with a wide variety of constituents. Thanks, Roger and Mia, for your time and your leadership in this realm. And as John said, I'm Brandon Diamond. I'm the area wildlife manager for Area 16, which includes the Gunnison Basin and the North Fork Valley, including the south half of the Grand Mesa. And tonight, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some public scoping we're doing in relation to some management issues in Game Management Unit 521. And of particular interest to us is the question of should over-the-counter archery elk licenses be limited in that GMU? So just a little bit of background, and these slides, I have a number of slides here that are pretty data heavy, but I think it'll give you a nice taste and snapshot of some of the issues that we're talking about and some of the data that sits behind those issues. GMU 521 is part of Data Analysis Unit E14. So it's a pretty significant geographic area that includes game management units 411, 52, 521, 41, 42, and 421. And E14 is somewhat unique in our region because we share it, we share management of elk with the Northwest region. Basically, we split the Grand Mesa in half, and the Northwest region oversees the 3 North game management units, and we oversee the 3 South game management units, including 521. The DAU for elk is currently below the population objective of 15,000 to 19,000. And one important point is that traditionally, many of the licenses on the Grand Mesa have been valid for the entire DAU rather than individual GMUs. And the issue there is that over time that has contributed in some cases to some disproportionate hunting pressure in some of the GMUs, and that's sort of what we're trying to address presently. Over the last 5+ years, we have addressed some of these issues in different ways regulatorily. We have reduced antlerless licenses over time in GMU 521 as well as across the Grand Mesa. In GMU 521, we no longer have List B antlerless licenses. There was a time when we had quite a few of those, but we don't anymore. They're all List A, and the antlerless archery List B license is not valid in Unit 521 anymore. So essentially, we've tried to separate 521 from those global hunt codes in terms of antlerless harvest, and you'll see that if you study the regulations brochure. The only hunt codes that now retain 521 in the group of GMUs you can hunt is the private land only hunt codes for 1st and 4th seasons. And just to give you an idea, in 2021, in terms of over-the-counter archery, 33% of the archery hunters reporting to hunt in E14 hunted GMU 521, so nearly over a third essentially. And then 35% of the over-the-counter archery harvest came from GMU 521. And so where does that leave us? So as managers and being responsive to our local constituents, I guess I would start off with saying that the foundation of the management we do is always our big game populations. We like to keep them healthy and happy and thriving for perpetual hunting opportunity, as well as just the fundamental aesthetic and cultural values that wildlife bring to our communities. But so we're always assessing herd health, whether that's breeding, conception dates, parturition dates, recruitment of calves, all those sorts of things. But we also consider, are elk allowed to be elk? Are they active during the rut? Can they use preferred habitats? Do they still bugle, and are they still vocal? Those are also some of the things as wildlife managers that we're interested in maintaining. But a particular concern these days for 521, there's essentially two issues. One is hunter crowding. And again, I'm speaking fairly specifically to over-the-counter archery seasons. This conversation has been going on for a number of years, and Roger can probably speak to this as well, since this is his backyard. But we've talked a lot about hunter crowding during the archery seasons and how the increased hunting pressure during archery seasons has changed the way the hunt looks and the hunting experience. And certainly we recognize that hunting experience is in the eye of the beholder to some degree. We all have our different thresholds and desires when it comes to hunting experience, but we commonly receive complaints in 521 about how the hunting experience looks these days. Again, going back to the disproportionate amount of hunting pressure that 521 sustains each year across 6 game management units in E14, it's something that we hear about and have been hearing about for multiple years. And then the second primary issue of concern would be overall elk abundance. As I referenced, we're below population objectives. We're attempting to grow the elk herd through a reduction in antlerless licenses, so we're not too far away and working in that direction. But certainly a lot of our constituents are concerned with the numbers of elk that they see these days. And we hear a lot about it in units 521. So we have a situation during archery seasons that can be summarized by a lot of constituents as crowded with very few elk on the ground, which is not a really sustainable recipe or an enjoyable hunting experience. And again, the rest of these slides are just going to be fairly data driven, but I think they'll give you an idea of what we're looking at here. So this first slide is total E14 either sex archery licenses for the over-the-counter hunt in comparison to hunting success overall. So what you see, this goes back to 1987 and goes through the present. The blue line is the number of total OTC archery hunters in E14. And you can see, especially starting about 2010, the number of archery over-the-counter hunters in E14 has increased significantly. From that same period on, you can see that the success rates have been dropping as a general trend as well. So again, lots of hunters out there, but success rates have been declining across the DAU. This slide breaks the number of over-the-counter archery hunters down by game management unit. And I would direct your attention to the top line, which is sort of a blue sky blue. That's Game Management Unit 521. And you can see that, again, starting around 2010, 11, 12, somewhere in there, maybe a little bit later, but the trend has been for significant increases in over-the-counter archery participation in Game Management Unit 521. The brownish reddish line there just under 521 is GMU 421, which is second in carrying the load of the hunters during the archery season. The three lines below are Game Management Units 411, 41, and 52, which receive a much smaller proportion of the hunting pressure during the over-the-counter archery seasons. This is a really busy slide, but I would direct your attention to the final column, the hunter density per GMU, and it's calculated as archers per square mile. And what that shows there, if you go down to the bottom row, which is 521, you can see that 521 is carrying a significantly higher density of hunters if you use that metric of hunters per square mile than the other game management units of the Grand Mesa. 421 is close, and that can be explained. Those higher elevation GMUs have a little bit better early elk habitat than some of the other ones do. We've had a variety of questions about how the over-the-counter archery participation compares to the over-the-counter rifle participation in 521, and that's what this graph is showing. So if you start at the bottom, the gray line is hunter participation during the third over-the-counter bull hunt. That's the third rifle season. The orange line is the second season rifle hunt for over-the-counter bull hunters, and then the top line is over-the-counter archery participation for 521 specifically. And what you can see there is that while the trends for rifle are generally increasing over time, this graph goes back to 2010, the steepness of that trend line is definitely significantly different when you assess over-the-counter archery. It's certainly become a very popular archery destination over time. Which brings me to the every year, for those of you that have participated in the big game harvest surveys, that is a random sample of hunters that Parks and Wildlife calls to get information on your hunts that fall. And this year was the first year that we added what we called opt-in hunter attitude survey questions. And I don't think that these have gone public yet. I think that the terrestrial section is working on a public platform where folks can look at these. But I asked, and folks said it was all right to put some of this data on the table. And I think it's very interesting. And we'll get into some of the specifics here in a second. Of interest to me was that of the big game harvest survey respondents that were selected for the standard harvest survey, 89% of them, so almost all of them, chose to opt into the additional question, which is great because it will yield a tremendous data set for us to look at for issues like this or herd management planning or all the things that we do on an annual basis. And for those opt-in questions, there was a variety of topics and issues, which I've listed here by bullet. So we asked respondents their opinions on the total number of elk they were seeing, the number of bulls they were seeing, their preferences on hunting more often versus seeing mature animals, what they would like to see the population do over the next 10 years, how crowded they felt by other hunters, how crowded they felt by non-hunters, and then their overall satisfaction with their hunting experience. And I will qualify this with these data are at the DAU level, so I can't break 521 out from this. The data I'm about to show you are for E14, not 521, but they are specific to over-the-counter archery hunters. So the first one, and you can read the questions, but how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with the total number of elk you saw in E14 during the 2021 season? And if you look at the different colors, they're categorized below the bar graph. And so in terms of the number of elk that folks saw, 25% were very dissatisfied, 23% were somewhat dissatisfied, and then 12% were neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, and then 24% somewhat satisfied, 14% very satisfied. But these data are compelling and interesting to us because what you see there is that the majority of respondents are indicating that they were dissatisfied with the number of elk they saw during their hunt, at least as far as 2021 went. The next question, how satisfied or dissatisfied were you with the number of bulls you saw? And it's a similar pattern to the previous slide. 31% of respondents were very dissatisfied with the number of bulls they saw. across the DAU in 2021. 24% were somewhat dissatisfied. The next one is worded this way: which statement comes closer to your own opinion? One, I want to be able to hunt elk in E14 as often as possible, even if it means fewer mature bulls. And two is sort of the converse of that. I want to be able to hunt mature bulls, even if it means I'm able to hunt less often. And so 55% of respondents wanted to hunt more often, whereas 44% of respondents were interested in seeing more males. Over the next 10 years, respondents indicated that they would like to see the elk herd increase slightly or increase moderately. Those were the categories that we provided them, and it looks like there is interest in seeing more elk in E14 in the coming years. In terms of crowding, this question is specific to how crowded they felt by other hunters while hunting in E14. And so the bottom two bars are very crowded and moderately crowded. So again, I would point out that the majority of respondents indicated that they were crowded during their hunt. 28% indicated they were slightly crowded, and 24% indicated they were not crowded at all, which seems to be over 100%. So I'll have to look into that one a little bit. Interesting. This is a great question to ask because we often talk these days about the other uses that are occurring on the landscape during our hunting seasons. And so this question focuses on how crowded respondents felt by non-hunters. So hikers, bikers, whatever is going on out there other than hunting while in E14. And interestingly, 58.5% of respondents indicated that they did not feel crowded at all by non-hunters on the Grand Mesa. And then in terms of overall hunting experience, despite some of the earlier slides, looks like 31% of respondents were somewhat satisfied and 23% of respondents were very, very satisfied with their hunting experience in E14. So there's a snapshot of those data. And then to wrap this up so we can have plenty of time for questions if they're there, the Area 16 office, my office, recently initiated a public scoping survey that we publicized and put out on our social media, our Facebook pages. And so they're easy to find. Perhaps John can post a link in the chat for folks to grab while you're online here. But it's open to anyone and everyone. We posted it July 6th. I'd like to let it run for another couple of weeks at least as we lead up to possible development of an issue paper for the November Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting. But help yourself, feel free to engage in the survey. And as always, feel free to give us a call or engage your local district wildlife managers or other CPW staff if you're interested in getting down in the weeds on some of these issues more. The more robust public input we can get on this, obviously the better management recommendations we can make moving forward. So that's that, John.
Very good. Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate it. We have posted the link in the Facebook Live chat for folks to take that survey. If they have not already, we would certainly love to get some of your feedback. I know there's been a few comments in here, and I just want to urge folks that, along with the comments in the Facebook chat, your voice can be heard even louder through the use of that public survey. So folks who participate in that, I just want to thank them. Did have a couple questions come in for you, Brandon. First one comes from Will. He's curious if there's been any consideration on how limiting 521 could impact crowding and other over-the-counter archery units in the Southwest region, particularly units 43, 471, 53, 63, and even 68 to the south of the Gunnison Basin. Added in with the comment of perhaps it's time to consider statewide limited archery. But have we, considered how limiting that unit could affect other over-the-counter units?
Hey,
That's
Brandon,
great.
let me start off with this one, then I'll let you jump in a little bit, because I often get similar questions like this, and I want to give folks the why we do this. Why are we looking at 521? Why are we looking at units similar to 521? And if we remember going back a few years ago when we did the 5-year season structure, we were looking potentially at a statewide limitation on archery. Through that conversation with the commission, which there was a lot of, the determination is that at that time, we would not limit archery statewide, but we were asked by the commissioners at that time that when a unit or group of units meet certain criteria, that we would look at limitations, and that could be rifle, that could be archery. It's really what was the issue, or what is the issue going on. So those two issues that the commission wanted us to look at is when we have a social and a biological issue, that we would look at limiting that seasons that we're having those issues. And again, going back to 521, I think folks think that these are often driven by staff, and I think Roger would even agree to this. This is largely the locals in that general area want to apply this to themselves because of an issue that's going on locally in and around their community. So we've eventually, Roger would probably agree to that too, that we're trying to listen. We're doing multiple other things. We've limited other methods. We're applying, collars to those animals. And it just, the problem continues to grow as far as that population, at least in 521. So we want to make sure that we're listening to a wider range of constituents, which is why Brandon's doing the study within that general area. But I just wanted to talk on, a little bit about that and kind of the mandates we're given from the commission when we're looking at limitations on certain seasons.
And I would jump in and say, I agree, Corey, with your assessment there. And there's been, I think it's been a long time coming with this unit, even before the last 5-year big game season structure. And the disappointment was, coming from field staff and biologists, that we were looking at potentially a statewide archery limitation, which didn't happen. And so that's what is kind of pushed this even more in the forefront. And I think pressure, or at least keeping this issue in front of, for these areas that meet that criteria, to keep it in front of the commission, and hopefully, that if it is a biological recommendation on the next 5-year season structure, that it gets done statewide, which would only be 2 years after. Well, we're going into the 3rd year of the 5-year right now. So if there was if 521 got done, those other units would be affected for a couple years, and then it would go to the commission and hopefully get it done on a statewide or Northwest, Southwest, or both region.
And maybe just a couple final thoughts on that question. We absolutely, we don't enter into these decisions lightly, and we certainly understand that what we do in 521 will influence adjacent DAUs and game management units, a variety of which are in Area 16 in my area. But it's a topic that comes up fairly regularly in the Southwest, as I think a lot of folks are aware. As we've reduced our elk herds and had increases in hunting pressure, it's just lent itself to a little more challenging management. And, Jamin referenced that him and I are on the distribution allocation work group. I mean, I've heard this same conversation relative to the Uncompahgre Plateau, as to the Grand Mesa. And so, it's a conversation that's going on at different stages across the region and in different local areas, but it's to the point in 521 where our elk population has gotten to the point where there's just not as many animals out there available to folks. All the while, we have increasing interest in hunting that game management unit, particularly by archery. So it's sort of this perfect recipe of getting back to that hunt quality and other issues. But we definitely think a lot about adjacent game management units and DAUs. This one's particularly challenging because we have the interface with the Northwest region as well. So we're not only talking as a region in the Southwest, we're also talking to our Northwest peers as well to try to navigate through these issues in the most pragmatic way possible.
Well said, Brandon, and everybody. I appreciate taking the time to chat about that topic. Again, folks, if you want to take the 521 public survey, it's been posted in the Facebook chat a couple times in there. So go in there and weigh in on that topic if you'd like to. All right, we're going to go ahead and transition now. I'm going to let Roger take the lead on this one, but we wanted to give a couple minutes. I know Roger's been kind of interested in the use of trail cameras out on our public lands as it pertains to hunting, and we'll be able to roundtable this. But Roger wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of ask the questions that have been on your mind on that topic.
This is a topic that's been brought to me several times over the last probably year and a half, and it's in regards to Kebler Pass area, the Irwin town site area. And obviously that's just a microcosm of one area, but people seeing a lot of trail cams on water holes, people that know the water holes, multiple trail cams on that is distracting from the experience for them. So I wanted to bring it up. I've done some research prior to this, and I've looked into Arizona and Utah, who have recently outlawed trail cams on public land, and obviously there's language in their laws that are very specific as far as aiding in the harvest of big game. One of the things that I do kind of see come up from time to time, or more often, or come up continuously, is that you have cellular cameras out there now to where you don't even have to be in the field. And there's scouting services that are selling scouting services for out-of-state hunters that can't come to the area, selling images and stuff like that. So that's probably the biggest negative. And then, or that would be maybe the biggest positive for potentially looking at trail cam enforcement or some sort of regulation there. The negative part of it is it's potentially unenforceable. And, I think a lot of laws probably are unenforceable other than peer pressure from hunters. And you would certainly have a lot of people complying. I look at it like road closures. If somebody closes a road, it's really hard the first year or two, but after that, it gets easier and easier. So that's kind of a microcosm of the issue that keeps being brought up to me, and I felt like it should be brought up for comment from CPW staff here at this meeting.
Roger, while we're waiting for questions, I appreciate that. I've heard of the issue, a few times. It's nice to hear from some of the public on what they view the issue is, and regardless of what I guess I think about it or not, I'm here to listen to you all. So I guess if there's those that are out there that have questions or comments, please get those to us as we look through this. I know recently we've talked with the chief or the acting chief of law enforcement on ethical issues and how we're going to address those into the future. So I encourage folks to speak out if there are any.
And I would have to say the same, Corey. We've been talking about it on the Sportsman's Roundtable for about 8 years, about the whole game camera issue. Specifically, in the past, we've talked about the selling of the GPS points and coordinates of where the animals are. And as you said, the technology has just grown. I mean, I have cellular game cameras that, I get elk instantly as soon as they walk in front of my camera. But on public land, that's something, I don't know, do we need to bring it to a commission and bring a petition to the commission, or what we need to do? And on a personal level, like you mentioned that people say it spoils their hunt. It is something when you walk past a game camera on public land, just like, okay, who's watching me? Because you don't always know, but it is public land. So. I would be curious to see what kind of questions and comments that you receive.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, Mia. It's amazing. I mean, a tool that can be useful to hunters, how they potentially even see if it is an ethical violation and want to limit themselves. So, you know, I applaud folks for looking at that and continue to take strides to make sure that we're all playing on the same field. But as far as your questions, I believe you're right, but let me double check, and I'll talk to some folks on. I mean, if this is something that even whether it's a sportsman's roundtable or just hunters in general would like to bring to the commission for potential action, I'll get back with you and Roger on that.
John, one thing I would put out to the group is years ago, it's been a few years now, we had some folks that were trying to initiate a business of selling location and camera information on Gunnison National Forest. And I guess I would just throw out there that in my interpretation, I think the Forest Service law enforcement folks concurred, was that if they're doing that in a commercial way, they need to be permitted by their local forest ranger district. And so if folks are detecting that and they think that's going on in a situation that is not permitted, I would certainly encourage you to report that to your district wildlife managers or your Forest Service or BLM law enforcement folks right away.
Very good. Thanks, Brandon. Any other comments before we transition? All right. Well, very good. All right, with that, I will go turn it over to our Deputy Region Manager, Matt Thorpe, who's going to provide a wolf update for us before we get to the last little bit of this meeting here.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. I'll try to make this brief because I know everybody's anxious to get to the other important things that are going on in their lives. I'm Matt Thorpe. I'm one of the deputy region managers here in the Southwest region. Out of our Southwest region, we actually supervise the statewide game damage program. And so one of the aspects of Proposition 114, which mandates that Parks and Wildlife develop a plan to reintroduce wolves, also requires that we develop a fair compensation for ag producers and also ways to try to deter and prevent damage caused by wolves to livestock. And so because of my role, I've actually gotten to be part of the planning process. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but just some kind of quick updates. You know, as it stands at this moment, we still just have the one pack that's up in North Park. They certainly got a lot of press this winter because there was quite a few depredation incidents. I'm happy to report that here, you know, at least as of the last 2 to 3 months, that damage seems to have stopped. So that's definitely a positive. Another important thing to note, I think, is that we've actually hired a person who's going to be strictly working on wolf conflict prevention. His name is Adam Baca. He comes to us from Montana's Wildlife Services. So he's been working up in the Northern Rocky Mountains for the last 5 years or so, working with landowners, trying to help them, you know, whether it's putting up the fladry, which is the electrified flagging, other techniques to try to reduce wolf conflicts with livestock. So at this moment, he's actually living up in North Park, trying to work with some of those landowners, develop those relationships. So that's, I think, really important for us as an agency as we try to put the onus that's been put on us from Proposition 114 into place. Just wanted to touch real quickly. So, you know, one of the aspects of Proposition 114, again, is we have to develop a plan so that we're ready to put wolves on the ground by the end of December 2023. So as part of that, we've done a large outreach. So you guys may have recalled last summer, we actually did, I think, about 40 public meetings all around the state where anybody could come in and you know, try to learn some stuff, but also give feedback. We've also convened 2 groups. One is a technical working group. So this largely consists of biologists and other wolf experts from other states who are giving feedback on sort of the technical aspects of wolf, whether it's reintroduction, conflict minimization, compensation, education, and outreach. But we also have a stakeholder advisory group, and that contains, I think there's about 16 folks representing a bunch of different stuff. So we have sports people, we have wolf advocates, we have ag producers, outfitters, county commissioners. So really a pretty broad spectrum from kind of representing the whole state. And so they really are giving us more kind of their feedback, but based on the social aspects of what wolf reintroduction will mean for Colorado. I'm going to try to share my screen if I can. So hopefully everybody can see a slide entitled Wolf Restoration and Management Plan Development Timeline. So again, we've been working over the last year on this. So you can see that we're trying to wrap up the feedback that we're getting from our SAG, the stakeholder group, and the TWIG, which is a technical working group. We're going to have here in August kind of the final recommendations. And then basically from September to November, CPW staff will be developing the draft plan. So this will be the actual wolf plan itself. Our goal is to present that to the Parks and Wildlife Commission in December of 2022. And really kind of, I think the key for folks that are here with us tonight is that from January through February and also into April, that's going to be another significant opportunity for you as the public to provide your input to our Parks and Wildlife Commission. So they're going to have a draft plan, but then there will be opportunities that will be available to the public where you can make your own comments about what you think, if there's things that should be tweaked or things that you like. That's all very important feedback that our Parks and Wildlife Commission needs to know so that we can get this plan approved. And again, the ultimate goal is that by May of 2023, we'll hopefully be adopting the final plan and putting that into place. So again, it really, I think, is critical for you all as interested, whether you're sports people, whether you're wolf advocates, whatever. The commission really needs to hear that feedback from the people that are going to be living with wolves. And I mean, certainly wolves will be in the Southwest region at some point. So I think that's why we as staff really take this seriously and really want to do the best that we can to develop a plan that's going to work for all of Colorado, but particularly since we live here in the Southwest region, our region, for our ag producers, outfitters, sports people. So again, really, be looking out starting kind of that December and into the winter, early spring timeframe for those opportunities. Last thing I should mention is that I'm sure everybody probably saw, but back in February, wolves were actually relisted through the Fish and Wildlife Service. So they're technically an endangered species on the federal level. The state of Colorado is working with the federal government, trying to get an exemption that essentially would allow us, it's called a 10J rule, that would allow us to say that the wolves in Colorado are an experimental population. And by doing that, that would give us additional management flexibility, because certainly as wildlife managers, we want to try to have every tool possible in the toolbox for managing wolves, because we know sometimes we need to manage these animals. So if everything goes well, then we should still be able to meet the timeline specified in Proposition 114. For us, it's a little bit of a challenge because we don't control the federal timeline. They actually just are kicking off their process, which is going to be separate from what we do. But they tell us that they think that they can get their ducks in a row. And that's why it's going to help us, again, trying to have our plan already in place by May. Hopefully that streamlines the process overall. So anyways, I'm sorry that was a lot of information about wolves. I kind of live in a wolf world, so hopefully it wasn't too much, but appreciate your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thanks, Matt. Not seeing any questions pertaining to the wolf topic in the chat. would like to open it up to our caucus reps if they have anything that they would like to ask on that topic before we get to some of the last few questions I've seen here.
I don't have
I
anything
don't
on.
really have anything, John.
Very
Sorry,
good.
Roger.
Well, thanks, everyone. The last question that we got that I wanted to double back to from an earlier presentation for this last Q&A bit, and Rachel or Brandon, I'm not sure, and Jamin, obviously, maybe get in on this topic, but is there any kind of update on what we've seen from last year's testing for CWD amongst mule deer? The person who asked the question, I believe his name's Colby, was kind of particularly interested in Unit 63.
To my knowledge, we did not have any positive CWD tests in GMU 63. That said, it is across the street on the Grand Mesa mule deer DAU, so it's there, and we still think about you know, how to effectively manage for that to some degree, but there have been no positives in Unit 63 for deer or elk over time, I believe.
Very good. All right, folks. Well, I believe that is it for the questions that we'll be able to address in this meeting as it relates to the Southwest region. So we are going to go ahead and adjourn for the evening. I look forward to catching up with everybody again later this winter when we do our next region, Sportsperson's Caucus. But for right now, any folks who had some questions as they related to other regions, we've got 3 other region Sportsperson's Caucus meetings coming over the next few weeks. The next one coming in the Southeast region on Wednesday night. That'll be back here on Facebook Live as well. And for anybody else who missed a portion of the meeting, you can watch it back on Facebook Live, or we'll have it posted to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife YouTube page shortly after this meeting concludes. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and thanks to all of our panelists, all of our CPW staff, and to our caucus representatives. Thanks everybody for joining us. All right, with that, we will shut it down. Thank you.